if you start to actually take a critical look at violence, even in our society, it's everywhere. So we've kind of agreed not to use violence, but that's enforced by violence. It's enforced by violence by the fact that we've all just agreed that we'll only let the state or the government use violence against us as a group where we've broken the rules in the form of policing, and also outwardly in the form of the military to anyone who comes and threatens us. But they're in charge of that violence, and that kind of keeps us peaceful because we kind of know. And you can see this in your life in many other ways. I think we're all on the lookout for violence. It basically seems to govern most of the things that we do. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but you're constantly calculating for it. It plays a role between genders. It plays a role if you're trying to get into a nightclub. A bouncer is big for a reason. It's kind of around us. And then if you start to think about the way that you interact with children, a lot of parenting is about trying to teach your child to share, to kind of it's kind of warfare when you're younger. A lot of the time in school there's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of issues around.
Did you used to run
cohesion.
to the toy box, mate? And, take the best train out of the...
Take the whole thing. Or maybe I'd see someone else with a train and be like, I want that train,
Yeah, that sounds more likely, yeah.
And that basically we're kind of spend a lot of our time programming each other not to hurt each other.
Yeah, so the point of that is, mate, that... So, you might run into an unfortunate circumstance, walking around a big city in South America or something, right? And the fact is that could be a relatively common occurrence compared to what we're used to over here. But the reality is, if given the same circumstances over here with the people that currently live here, wherever we are, we would be doing the same things if, say, the government had as many flaws, for example, or we just didn't have the right controls and things in place in society in the form of that threat of violence, I think is what you're talking about. So
the second part of that is, who's to say that's not us this isn't a permanent state, of affairs.
Correct. Well, let's take case in point is some of the recent protests and things in America. So over there at the moment, there's a lot of people with guns, a lot of people with different weapons and things getting around, that's very much on the extreme level. I'm not sure if any triggers of those guns have actually been pulled, and shot towards people, but that's a scary place to be in. Yeah. It's almost like where the government has, lost control or hasn't got control over what's going on. They've lost that monopoly on violence.
Or they're inciting some dissidents so that they can squash that violence. That may be part of it too. But now we're starting to understand, okay, all right, maybe there is a bit more of this going on. Maybe I don't feel physically threatened in my day-to-day. Sadly, a lot of people do. But then even if I don't feel that, okay, well, let's have a look throughout time. And you can easily start to pick out a whole bunch of bad stuff that's happened from people that, we still, if you've still got a grandparent alive, they've probably survived through some of the most horrific violence that the Earth's ever seen. So,
prior to the big world wars, mate, the biggest killer was viruses or, contagions around the world. And then world wars hit and the humans came in, decided it was their turn to start running for the first place in that battle.
Yeah, so
very easily.
So that if you start to take that premise that people are dangerous, okay, not because they're bad, just because that's our nature, right? Then all of a sudden there's some interesting things that it kind of flips on its head, and you start to kind of connect it to our first discussion that if there's this idea that, we all kind of want our lives to get better, we all want certain things, we want abundance, but if you ever worked in a company where it's not growing, all of a sudden it becomes quite political and quite you're sort of all fighting over that next promotion. It gets pretty ugly. And there's a nice framework in place for how you fight about those things, but you start fighting. So if there's only one bottle of Coca-Cola in the world instead of unlimited bottles, maybe things get a bit more interesting between people.
You can have that. I don't want the sugar.
People copy one another, and then people want what other people want. We all do. It's just natural part of our human nature. So this is kind of his idea. And then growth starts to become a lot more important. And if things stop growing, you start fighting over what's left and things can get really ugly.